Live television is supposed to feel safe, controlled chaos, but still controlled. But every so often, something slips through, something real. In this video, we'll look at 5 more moments when live TV broke that illusion. These events weren't planned, weren't staged, and once they happened, there was no going back. What you're about to see are some of the most disturbing and unforgettable moments ever broadcast to the world. It was June 12, 2000 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. A quiet afternoon in the neighborhood of Jardim Botânico took a terrifying turn when bus line 174 was hijacked. Around 2:20 p.m., a man named Sandro Barbosa do Nascimento boarded the bus intending to rob the passengers. But what began as a robbery quickly escalated into a live hostage crisis broadcast across the country. Nascimento's life was marked by hardship. Born into poverty, he experienced trauma early on. When he was just 8, he saw his mother lose her life in a violent incident. Soon after, he ended up living on the streets. In 1993, he survived the Candelaria massacre, where several homeless children were killed by police officers. Many of those victims were Nascimento's friends. That experience left a lasting impact on him. By 2000, Nascimento had already spent time in juvenile detention and prison. He struggled with untreated mental health problems and carried the weight of his past. He felt ignored by society and was growing increasingly unstable. That day, he boarded the bus armed with a .38 caliber revolver. He planned only to rob the passengers, but when someone signaled to a passing police car, things spiraled out of control. The police approached, unaware of what was going on. Nascimento responded by holding everyone at gunpoint. Police quickly surrounded the bus. Major TV networks arrived and began live coverage. It was one of the first times a hostage crisis had been shown in real time in Brazil. Millions watched, not knowing how it would end. Nascimento's initial demands were simple. He asked for a new driver because the original one had escaped and requested weapons. When denied, his behavior became more unpredictable. Around 6 p.m., he threatened to harm a hostage if his demands weren't met. He used several people as shields, taunting the police and the cameras. One chilling moment came when he pointed the gun at a woman named Janena Lopes Neves and fired near her head. The bullet didn't hit her. It was a bluff. But he told the other hostages to act like she had been shot, and they did, terrified of what he might do next. The footage shocked viewers across the country. By 6:50 p.m., Nascimento became more desperate. He exited the bus with a hostage, a teacher named Geisa Firmo Goncalves, using her as a shield. A tactical police officer rushed toward them with a submachine gun. Nascimento pulled Goncalves with him. The officer fired but missed and instead struck her in the face. Nascimento then fired at her 3 more times. She collapsed on the pavement. The bullet from the officer was later ruled an accident, but it didn't change the outcome. Geisa had lost her life in front of the entire country. Nascimento was quickly taken down by police and restrained in a vehicle, but shortly after he stopped breathing. The cause was listed as asphyxiation, though how it happened remains unclear. Some believe it was intentional. Others think it was due to the struggle and the pressure placed on him. The event left the nation in shock. It exposed the failures in Brazil's social system, how it had ignored people like Nascimento for years. Some saw him as a victim of that neglect. Others saw only the damage he caused. A documentary, Bus 174, directed by Jose Padilla, later examined the event and Nascimento's life. It featured interviews with hostages, family, and experts, offering a deeper look into how someone ends up on that path. Geisa was laid to rest in Fortaleza, with over 3,000 mourners in attendance. Nascimento was buried in a shallow grave with only his aunt present. Though it's been years, the hijacking of Bus 174 remains one of Brazil's darkest and most debated tragedies. It was November 5, 2006 in Terrell, Texas. Louis William Bill Conrad Jr. was a 56-year-old assistant district attorney with a long-standing reputation for professionalism and hard work. On the surface, his life seemed stable and quiet, but behind the scenes, events had already been set in motion that would lead to a tragic and highly publicized end. Earlier that year, NBC's To Catch a Predator, working with the activist group Perverted Justice and the Murphy, Texas police, had launched a sting operation targeting adults who were trying to communicate inappropriately with minors online. Volunteers posed as underage children in chat rooms and waited for adults to initiate conversations. If a meeting was arranged, the men would be invited to a decoy house, where they'd be confronted by the show's host, Chris Hansen, and arrested by local police. Unbeknownst to Conrad, he had been communicating with one of these decoys, believing he was talking to a 13-year-old boy. Though he never showed up at the meeting spot, his chats were enough to place him under investigation. By November 4th, Conrad had stopped responding online and deleted his profile, likely realizing he'd been caught. This raised concerns among both law enforcement and the show's producers. Just after midnight on November 5th, Chris Hansen contacted the Murphy Police Department and pushed to take further action. Despite the fact that Conrad had never appeared at the bait house, A search warrant was requested for his home in Terrell. There were serious problems with the warrant. It listed the wrong city, county, and date, but the operation continued anyway. Around 2 p.m., a SWAT team was deployed to Conrad's house. They tried to contact him by phone and at the door, but there was no response. At 2:40 p.m., officers forced their way in. Inside the house, they found material linking Conrad to the online conversations. As they moved through the home, they saw him at the end of a hallway. Conrad said he didn't want to hurt anyone. Moments later, he used a gun he owned to take his own life before officers could intervene. Emergency responders airlifted him to a hospital, but he was declared dead not long after. The entire operation had been filmed by the To Catch a Predator crew. Although the footage wasn't aired immediately, cameras had recorded nearly everything, including the raid and the aftermath. The line between law enforcement and entertainment had blurred in a disturbing way. Conrad's death sparked serious backlash. Legal experts, journalists, and the public began questioning the choices made by both the police and NBC. Many were alarmed by the decision to send a SWAT team to arrest someone who hadn't made direct threats and who hadn't even shown up to the bait house. Some critics felt that the sting operation prioritized ratings over responsibility. Even the police department faced internal problems. One detective, Jimmy Patterson, was mistakenly detained by his own colleagues after leaving the sting house, highlighting the confusion and chaos of the entire setup. Soon after, Conrad's sister, Patricia, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against NBC Universal. She argued that the show had gone too far and that its producers, along with police, had ignored the serious risks involved. The case was eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. In the years that followed, To Catch a Predator stopped airing new episodes, and many began to question the ethics of public sting operations involving media. While the goal may have been to protect others, the way this case unfolded raised difficult questions about accountability, privacy, and the cost of making law enforcement part of a TV show. Louis Conrad's story is a reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control when public exposure becomes part of the justice process, and how even well-intentioned actions can lead to outcomes no one wanted. It was the morning of February 28, 1997, in North Hollywood, Los Angeles. Most people were just starting their day when something extreme happened that would be remembered for decades. What began as a bank robbery quickly turned into one of the most intense shootouts in U.S. police history. By the end of it, over 2,000 bullets had been fired, and two men, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu, would change the way law enforcement handled high-risk situations. At 9:17 a.m., Phillips, 26, and Matasareanu, 30, entered a Bank of America branch on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. They weren't ordinary robbers. They were armed with military-style rifles, wore head-to-toe homemade body armor, and had been planning the robbery for months. Everything was calculated: the weapons, the armor, the timing. Once inside, they ordered everyone to the floor. To make their message clear, they fired into the ceiling. They forced the tellers to open the vault, expecting to take around $750,000, but a recent change in the bank's cash delivery schedule meant they only walked away with $303,305. Frustrated, Matasareanu emptied a 75-round magazine into the vault, destroying the rest of the cash. As they prepared to leave, a routine police patrol spotted the two masked men. Realizing what was happening, the officers radioed for backup. Within minutes, the bank was surrounded by officers, many armed only with handguns and shotguns. The police tried to get them to surrender. Instead, the robbers responded with heavy gunfire. The police were at a huge disadvantage. Their weapons couldn't match the firepower or the body armor the suspects had. The robbers didn't just fire at the police. They fired at anything nearby. With bullets flying, officers struggled to keep control. Some rushed to local gun stores, grabbing AR-15 rifles just to hold their ground. SWAT officers were already training across town and headed to the scene, but they were still 18 minutes away. At 9:52 a.m., Phillips and Matasareanu split up. Phillips hid behind a truck while Matasareanu tried to escape in a hijacked car. Phillips had already been injured, and when his rifle jammed, he switched to a handgun, but he was quickly surrounded and hit several more times. Realizing he had no way out, Phillips ended his own life right there. Matasareanu was still trying to escape. He tried to take a civilian's vehicle, but the keys had been removed. Left exposed, he hid behind the car as police fired at him. Eventually, SWAT arrived and disabled him by aiming at his legs. He collapsed and was unable to move. Although he tried to give up, his injuries were too severe. Paramedics didn't reach him in time, and he passed away over an hour later. Incredibly, no officers or civilians died in the exchange, but 18 people were hurt, including 11 police officers and 7 bystanders. The level of danger, chaos, and sheer number of bullets made this one of the most violent encounters in modern police history. The aftermath led to major changes in law enforcement. Officers' standard weapons were no match for what they had faced, so the LAPD and other departments upgraded their equipment. The Pentagon even provided 600 M16 rifles to the LAPD. Police training also changed, placing more focus on how to handle high-powered threats. Officers were also given stronger body armor. A year after the shootout, 19 officers were awarded Medals of Valor and invited to meet President Bill Clinton. Even though the fight left many injured, it was seen as a major victory for law enforcement. The suspects had the advantage, but officers worked together, acted fast, and managed to protect the public. Phillips and Matasarianu came in ready for a fight they thought they could control, but their frustration, paired with the overwhelming response from police, led to their end. What happened in North Hollywood that day left a mark on American law enforcement that won't be forgotten. It was July 2020 in Hangzhou, China. Lai Huili, a 51-year-old woman, had disappeared without warning. She was last seen on July 4th, returning home after running errands with her daughter. Her husband, Xu Guoli, 55, said he woke up the next morning and found her gone. He reported her missing and later appeared on TV, looking calm but worried, asking the public for help. Her disappearance quickly gained national attention. Xu's public appearances made him seem like a devastated husband, but behind the scenes, investigators were uncovering troubling inconsistencies. On July 6th, Lai's daughter contacted the police, reporting that her mother hadn't returned or made contact. Xu told police that July 4th had been uneventful. They had dinner, watched TV, and helped their daughter with homework. He claimed he woke at 5:30 a.m. on July 5th and found her missing. But surveillance footage told a different story. Police launched a large-scale investigation, reviewing over 6,000 hours of security footage from the Sanbao Baiyuan residential area where they lived. Cameras showed Lai returning home on July 4th, but not leaving afterward. She had vanished inside the building. Xu kept appearing on TV, pleading for answers, but his story didn't add up. Investigators grew more suspicious as they realized there was no evidence of Lai leaving the complex. Then, on July 22nd, police found human remains in the building's septic tank. The tank was drained over 25 hours using 38 trucks. Lab tests later confirmed the remains belonged to Lai Huili. Her body had been hidden in the most unthinkable place, right in the community where she lived. The next day, Xu was taken into custody. He stuck to his story at first, insisting his wife had left on her own, but under further questioning, he confessed. Xu admitted he had drugged Lai's milk with sleeping pills on the night of July 4th. Once she was asleep, he ended her life. Then, using tools he had bought in advance, he dismembered her body inside their apartment. Xu said he acted out of deep personal and financial stress. Afterward, he tried to cover everything up. He filed a missing person report, offered a reward, and made several TV appearances pretending to be a desperate husband. All the while, he knew exactly what had happened. According to Xu, he had become overwhelmed with pressure, mainly from financial issues, property investments losing value, and the rising costs of their daughter's education. Although he claimed he still cared for his wife, he said resentment had built up over time. Police later confirmed that Xu had carefully planned everything. He bought tools in advance and thought he could avoid leaving evidence, but his plan unraveled under the weight of the investigation. Xu went on trial at the Hangzhou Intermediate People's Court. The court found that he had acted with full intent and called the act especially cruel, not just because of what happened, but also because of how he misled the public. On July 26, 2021, Xu was sentenced to death. His sentence was upheld by the Supreme People's Court, and he was executed in March 2023. The case became one of China's most shocking in recent memory. The Sanbao Baiyuan complex, once quiet and ordinary, turned into a place marked by fear. Neighbors were shaken. Some moved out. Others invited monks to conduct rituals. People avoided walking around at night, and many felt uneasy just being there. Xu Guoli had lived a double life, appearing as a loving husband while hiding something horrifying. His actions left lasting scars on his community and Lai's family. Even after the case was closed, the haunting details stayed with everyone who followed the story. What started as a missing person report turned into one of the most chilling cases China had ever seen. It was December 4, 2010 in Dusseldorf, Germany. The popular TV show Wetten Das was broadcasting live to millions. Known for its wild stunts and celebrity appearances, the show had something special lined up that night. 23-year-old Samuel Koch, an aspiring stuntman, was ready to perform a dangerous act that could launch his career or end it. Koch had trained for weeks. The plan was to jump over 5 moving cars using spring-loaded stilts, which allowed him to leap high into the air. He would perform somersaults over the cars and land safely on the other side. Each car would be slightly larger than the last, and the final one was to be driven by his own father. The challenge was risky, but Koch had done it in practice many times. Inside the studio, the crowd was excited. TV host Thomas Gottschalk welcomed the audience, and the show began. Koch looked calm and confident as he lined up for his first jump. He cleared the first car smoothly. The second attempt had to be stopped due to a mistake, but he remained focused. On the third jump, he landed perfectly, and the audience erupted in applause. Then came the fourth car, driven by his father. As it sped toward him, Koch leapt, but something went wrong. He mistimed the jump. His feet clipped the windshield, and he didn't gain enough height. His head slammed into the car, and his body went limp mid-air before crashing to the ground. The studio fell silent. Viewers at home watched in shock as medical staff rushed to him. Koch wasn't moving. The live broadcast quickly cut away, and the show was halted. A statement from producers soon confirmed he was seriously hurt. Doctors performed emergency surgery, but the injuries were severe. 2 of Koch's cervical vertebrae were fractured. He had sustained damage to his spinal cord, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. News of the accident spread fast, and support poured in online. Even pop star Justin Bieber, who had been scheduled to appear on the show that night, tweeted his concern. His segment was canceled. The show's future was suddenly uncertain. Wetten Das had been on air for 29 years, but it had never experienced something like this. The broadcast was officially stopped 20 minutes after the accident. Public discussions began about whether the show's stunts were too dangerous. The show's producers said safety had always been a priority, but no amount of planning could change what had happened. Samuel's father, who was behind the wheel, was devastated. Despite the emotional weight, Koch's family stood by him and prepared for the long road ahead. Host Thomas Gottschalk was deeply affected. He had led the show for over 20 years, but this incident made him step back. Soon after, he resigned. His decision marked the end of an era for Wetten Das. In the weeks that followed, Koch's condition became clearer. Doctors confirmed that he would never regain movement below his neck. What had started as a career-defining stunt turned into a lifelong challenge. Koch later began speaking publicly, showing strength and determination despite his new reality. He focused on recovery and adjusting to life with a disability. Though the show was eventually suspended, Samuel Koch's story remained in the minds of those who watched it unfold. His accident raised serious questions about how far entertainment shows should go. But through it all, Koch became a symbol of resilience, reminding people not of a cautionary tale, but of someone who chose to keep moving forward.